My name is Wade, and 3 months ago, I thought the most exciting thing about my monthly business trips to Vancouver was the decent coffee at the airport. I'm a marketing consultant based in Seattle, and my work requires regular travel to meet with Canadian clients. Routine flights that had become so predictable, I could navigate customs and immigration on autopilot. What I didn't expect was for a simple baggage screening error to lead to the most meaningful relationship of my adult life. It was a Tuesday morning in September, and I was returning from a 3-day client conference in Vancouver, carrying my usual travel setup: laptop bag, overnight case, and a small gift bag containing maple syrup I'd bought for my sister. The flight had been delayed. I was running on minimal sleep, and I was looking forward to getting home to my apartment and a decent night's rest. The customs line at Seattle-Tacoma International Airport was longer than usual, but I'd been through the process hundreds of times and wasn't particularly concerned about any delays. I had my declaration form filled out, my passport ready, and the practiced patience that comes with frequent travel. When I reached the inspection station, the customs officer, a tall man with dark hair and serious brown eyes, reviewed my declaration form with more attention than usual. "Mr. Patterson," he said, reading from my passport, "you're declaring food items?" "Just maple syrup, a gift for my sister." "Can you show me the items, please?" I handed over the gift bag, which contained 2 bottles of maple syrup in decorative packaging. The officer, his name tag read E. Morrison, examined the bottles carefully, then ran them through some kind of scanner device. "Sir, I'm going to need you to step aside for additional screening. Please follow me." Something in his tone suggested this wasn't routine, and I felt the first flutter of concern. "Is there a problem with the maple syrup?" "We'll need to conduct a more thorough examination. This way, please." Officer Morrison led me to a separate area, away from the main customs line, where there were additional screening equipment and what appeared to be a private examination room. My concern was escalating into genuine worry. "Mr. Patterson, our preliminary scan detected some anomalies in your declared items. I'm going to need to conduct a more detailed search of your baggage and personal effects." "Anomalies? They're just bottles of maple syrup from a tourist shop." "I understand, sir, but we need to verify that. Please place your bags on the examination table." Officer Morrison began a systematic search of my luggage that was thorough but professional. He examined every item, ran various pieces through additional scanners, and made notes on an official form. Throughout the process, he remained courteous but serious, explaining each step of the procedure.
"Sir, I'm also going to need to conduct a personal search. This is standard procedure when our equipment detects potential contraband."
"A personal search? You mean—"
"A pat-down search, yes. It's conducted in a private room with proper protocols. Would you prefer a different officer, or are you comfortable proceeding?"
I looked at Officer Morrison, Elijah, according to his name tag, and tried to read his expression. He seemed professional and competent, and the idea of starting over with a different officer would mean additional delays. "That's fine. Let's get this over with." Elijah led me into a small windowless room that contained a table, 2 chairs, and what appeared to be additional screening equipment. The space was institutional, but clean, and there were posted procedures and protocols visible on the walls.
"Mr. Patterson, I need you to understand that this is a routine security procedure. I'll explain each step as we proceed, and you have the right to request a supervisor or different officer at any time."
"I understand. I just want to cooperate and get home."
"Good. I'm going to conduct a systematic pat-down search, starting with your upper body and working down. Please place your arms out to your sides."
Elijah's search was professional and methodical, but I couldn't help being acutely aware of his hands moving across my body as he checked for concealed items. He was thorough, but not invasive, explaining each area he was examining and maintaining the kind of professional demeanor that made the process feel clinical rather than personal.
I'm going to check your lower body now.
Elijah said as his hands moved systematically across my legs and torso.
Just routine procedure.
Despite the professional context, I found myself noticing things about Elijah that had nothing to do with customs procedures. He was probably in his early 30s, with the kind of quiet competence that suggested experience and training. His hands were warm and steady, and he conducted the search with efficient movements that spoke of someone who took his job seriously.
All right, Mr. Patterson. That completes the personal search. I'm going to run your maple syrup through one more scanner, and then we should be able to resolve this.
Elijah took the bottles to a different machine, one that looked more sophisticated than the equipment I'd seen in the main customs area. After a few minutes of testing, his expression changed from professional concern to what looked like embarrassment, apologetically. "Mr. Patterson, I owe you an apology." Confused. "What do you mean?" "Formally. The scanner that flagged your maple syrup was apparently malfunctioning. These are completely legitimate food items, exactly what you declared them to be." I stared at Elijah, processing what he'd just told me. Disbelieving. So all of this, the additional screening, the personal search, it was because of a machine error? Regretfully. "I'm afraid so. Sincerely. Sir, I am genuinely sorry for the inconvenience and the time this has taken. This kind of false positive is rare, but it does happen occasionally." Hopeful. "So I can go?" Reassuring. "You can absolutely go." Apologetically. Again, I apologize for the delay and the unnecessary procedures. Elijah began repacking my luggage with the same systematic care he'd used to search it, and I found myself watching his movements with more attention than the situation warranted. There was something about his obvious embarrassment over the error, combined with his continued professionalism, that made me see him as a person rather than just a customs officer. Understanding. "Officer Morrison, these things happen. I appreciate that you were just doing your job." Relieved. "Thank you for being understanding. Most people would be significantly less gracious about this kind of mistake." Pragmatic. "Well, I travel frequently for work, so I understand that security procedures are important. Better safe than sorry." Approving. "That's a good attitude. Mr. Patterson, is there anything I can do to help expedite your departure? Any connections you might have missed because of this delay?" "No connections, but I do have about a 2-hour drive back to my apartment." Wryly. "Though honestly, after the week I've had, I'm not in a huge hurry to get back to work emails and client calls." Elijah smiled for the first time since our interaction began, and the expression completely transformed his face from serious official to someone who looked genuinely warm and approachable. Empathetically. "Rough week? Exhausted. Client conference that ran long, delayed flights, and now customs adventures. Resigned. But it could be worse. Sympathetic. It definitely could be worse. Mr. Patterson, I hope the rest of your day goes more smoothly. Sincerely. Thank you. And Officer Morrison?" Reassuring. "You really don't need to apologize anymore. You were professional and courteous throughout the whole process. Grateful." "I appreciate that. Safe travels." I left the customs area and headed toward the parking garage, but something about the interaction with Elijah Morrison stuck with me during the drive. 2 weeks later, I was back at SeaTac for another business trip, and I found myself scanning the customs area when I returned, wondering if I might see Elijah again. It was a ridiculous thought. The airport employed dozens of customs officers, and the chance of encountering the same person was minimal. But as I approached the inspection stations, I spotted him at one of the desks, processing passengers with the same professional efficiency I remembered. When I reached his station, Elijah looked up from the passport he was examining and did a double take when he recognized me. "Mr. Patterson, how are you? No maple syrup this time, I hope?" "No maple syrup, just the usual business travel gear. How's the scanner situation?" "Fixed, thankfully. We had a technician come out the next day and recalibrate the whole system." "Good to hear. I'd hate for other travelers to go through unnecessary delays." Elijah processed my declaration form and stamped my passport with practiced efficiency, but he seemed to be taking more time with the interaction than was strictly necessary. "Business or pleasure this time?" he asked as he handed back my documents. "Business, unfortunately. Client meetings in Vancouver, back Thursday." "Well, hopefully this trip goes more smoothly than the last one." "I'm sure it will. Thanks, Officer Morrison." "Elijah," he said. "When I'm not conducting official business, I'm just Elijah." "Wade," I replied, understanding that we'd moved into slightly more personal territory. "Safe travels, Wade." The trip to Vancouver was routine, but I found myself thinking about my brief conversation with Elijah more than I should have. There had been something in his expression when he told me his first name that suggested he was interested in more than just professional courtesy. When I returned to Seattle 2 days later, I made a point of choosing the customs line that would lead me to Elijah's station. It was a decision that felt both natural and slightly reckless. I was actively seeking out contact with someone I barely knew, based on nothing more than a feeling that there might be mutual interest. "Wade," Elijah said when I approached his desk, and there was definite warmth in his voice. "How did the business meetings go?" "Better than expected, actually. Landed a new contract that should keep me busy for the next few months." "Congratulations, that's great news." Elijah processed my paperwork, but again he seemed to be taking more time than necessary, and I got the impression he was trying to extend our conversation. "Wade, can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Do you always travel on Tuesdays and Thursdays?" "Usually. Why?" "Coached." "Just curious about your schedule. I work those shifts regularly, so I guess I might see you again." "You might," I said. And there was definitely something happening in this conversation that went beyond customs procedures. Pleased. Good. I mean, it's always nice to see familiar faces. Direct. "Elijah, can I ask you something?" Open. "Of course." Probing. "Are you asking about my travel schedule for professional reasons or personal reasons?" Elijah glanced around the customs area, then looked back at me with an expression that was part professional caution and part personal interest. Quietly. "Personal reasons," he said quietly. Offering. "In that case, I should mention that I'm usually here around the same time every 2 weeks. Same flight schedule, same routine." Eager. "Good to know. Wade, I hope this doesn't sound inappropriate, but would you be interested in continuing this conversation somewhere that doesn't involve official government business?" Anticipating. "Like over coffee?" Enthusiastic. "Exactly like over coffee." Sincere. "I'd like that very much." Elijah discreetly handed me his business card with his personal number written on the back. "Ernest. Text me when you're free. I'd like to talk to you when I'm not wearing a uniform and you're not being processed through customs." "I will. Elijah, I'm glad that scanner malfunctioned." Pleased. So am I. 3 days later, Elijah and I met at a coffee shop in Capitol Hill, and seeing him in civilian clothes was a revelation. He wore jeans and a casual button-down shirt that showed off his athletic build, and without the official uniform and airport setting, he was relaxed and genuinely funny. Amused. "You know," Elijah said, as we found a quiet table near the window, I've never asked someone out who I met through a customs search. I've never been asked out by someone who patted me down for contraband. This is definitely a first for both of us. Curious. How does it feel? Honest. Surprisingly natural. Elijah, I have to admit, I've been thinking about you since that first encounter. Surprised. Really? Even though I subjected you to unnecessary government harassment? Appreciative. Especially because of how professional and apologetic you were about the whole thing. You could have been dismissive or bureaucratic, but you treated me with respect, even when you thought I might be smuggling something. Empathetic. I could tell you were just a regular business traveler who got caught up in a system error. It felt We spent 2 hours at the coffee shop, talking about everything from our respective careers, to travel experiences, to our observations about Seattle's social scene. Elijah was intelligent and thoughtful, with a dry sense of humor that perfectly complemented my own tendency toward sarcasm. Wade, Elijah said as we prepared to leave, I have to ask you something. What's that? Are you dating anyone? I probably should have asked that before suggesting coffee. No one's serious. I travel too much for work to maintain anything complicated. What about you? Same situation, actually. The airport schedule doesn't lend itself to traditional dating. So, we're both relationship-free due to work complications? Looks that way. Though I have to say, meeting someone through work might be a solution to that problem. How so? If we're both dealing with irregular schedules and travel demands, we might understand each other's professional constraints better than people in more traditional jobs. That's a good point. Elijah, would you like to have dinner sometime? Somewhere that doesn't involve federal security procedures? I'd love to. When are you free? I'm in town until next Tuesday. Any evening that works for you. How about Friday? I know a good Italian place that's quiet enough for actual conversation. Perfect! Our first official date was everything our airport encounters had suggested it might be. Easy conversation, mutual attraction, and the kind of natural chemistry that made hours feel like minutes. Elijah was charming and attentive, and seeing him in a social setting confirmed that my interest in him went far beyond the novelty of our unusual meeting. Wade, Elijah said as we shared dessert. Can I tell you something? Anything. I've been working airport security for 5 years, and I've never once been interested in someone I met through work. You're definitely a first. What made me different? Your attitude, mostly. You were patient and understanding about a situation that would have made most people angry or frustrated. And when I made that error with the scanner, you were gracious about it instead of demanding to speak to my supervisor. It was clearly a mistake. Getting angry wouldn't have solved anything. Exactly. But Wade, it was more than that. There was something about you that made me want to know more than just whether you were carrying contraband. Such as, what kind of work takes you to Vancouver every 2 weeks? What you do for fun when you're not traveling? Whether you're as interesting as you seemed during those brief airport conversations. The verdict is that you're more interesting than I expected, and I'm hoping this isn't our last dinner together. It definitely won't be our last dinner together. Over the next month, Elijah and I settled into a dating routine that worked around both our professional schedules. He worked 4 10-hour shifts at the airport, which gave him 3-day weekends that aligned well with my travel schedule. When I was in town, we'd have dinner, explore Seattle's neighborhoods, or attend events that took advantage of the city's cultural offerings. Elijah, I said one evening as we walked along the waterfront after dinner, I need to ask you something. What's on your mind? Do you ever think about that first encounter at customs? The whole pat-down search situation? What about it? Does it feel weird that our relationship started with you conducting an official search of my person? Elijah was quiet for a moment, considering the question. Sometimes it feels surreal that we met under those circumstances. But Wade, it was a completely professional interaction that led to a personal connection. I don't think there's anything inappropriate about that. I agree. It's just such an unusual origin story for a relationship. Most people meet online or through friends or at bars. We met because a government scanner malfunctioned and I had to verify that your maple syrup wasn't contraband. When you put it that way, it sounds pretty ridiculous. It sounds unique. Wade, I like that our story is different from everyone else's. Even if it involves federal security procedures? Especially because it involves federal security procedures. How many couples can say their relationship started with a customs inspection? Probably not many. Definitely not many. 3 months after our first date, Elijah and I had developed the kind of relationship that felt both passionate and stable. We'd navigated the practical challenges of his airport schedule and my travel demands, found ways to spend quality time together, and built something that was beginning to feel like a genuine partnership. Wade, Elijah said one evening as we cooked dinner together in my apartment, I need to tell you something. What's that? I'm in love with you. I stopped chopping vegetables and looked at Elijah across my kitchen. This man who'd entered my life through the most unexpected circumstances and had somehow become the most important person in it. I'm in love with you too, I said. Elijah, you've become the best part of my routine. Even though I'm the reason you had to endure an unnecessary strip search? Especially because of that. You showed me who you are as a person during that whole situation. Professional, courteous, genuinely apologetic when you realized the error. And you showed me who you are. Patient, understanding, gracious under pressure. So we're both satisfied with what we learned about each other during that customs inspection. I'm satisfied with everything I've learned about you since then. 6 months later, we moved in together, combining my downtown apartment with Elijah's furniture and creating a shared space that reflected both our tastes and lifestyles. The arrangement worked well. Elijah's airport schedule meant he was often awake early when I needed to travel, and my business trips created space for him to pursue his own interests and social activities. Any regrets about the malfunctioning scanner? Elijah asked one morning as we had coffee together before I left for another Vancouver trip. About the incident that led to an unnecessary security search, but also introduced me to the love of my life? Not a single regret, even though it was embarrassing and time-consuming. Especially because it was embarrassing and time-consuming. Elijah, if that scanner hadn't malfunctioned, we would have had a 30-second interaction and never seen each other again. True, sometimes the best things come from the most unexpected circumstances. And sometimes the most meaningful relationships start with the most professional interactions. As Elijah kissed me goodbye and wished me safe travels, I marveled at how completely my life had changed since that September morning, when a simple baggage screening had gone awry. What had started as an inconvenient delay had become the foundation for the most important relationship of my adult life. Sometimes the best connections happen when you're just trying to get through customs and go home.